going to read to you a scripture from John chapter 15, but then I'm going to tell you a story. And I hope that you appreciate this time we have together. John chapter 15, beginning at verse 5, reading down through verse 9. Jesus said, "I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love." Weather had come into town that was more severe than anybody could possibly imagine. The temperatures had plummeted below zero. The snow was coming in torrents. The wind was blowing hard. The mayor, Deborah Brown, had declared that the police should make sure that there was nobody left on the street. The homeless people that were part of town were to be brought into any facility. All the public buildings, at least the public portions, were left open. She wanted these people to be out of the wind and the cold. It was the police's job to bring them in. Shane Allen, a captain of more than 25 years service, seldom did daily patrols. He gave himself plenty of time to get to the station house this day, and it was a good thing. It was a hard trip. He was partnered with Rachel Singer. Rachel was a rookie. She had just finished her probation period, and they thought a good idea to put a veteran and a rookie together. And they started out on their patrol just after 3 in the afternoon, searching town for anybody that might be left out in the cold. Well, as time passed, they saw fewer and fewer people, fewer and fewer cars on the road. It got dark. The wind was blowing so hard that the snow was moving just horizontally. And then they saw it. This stooped figure crossing the street, dragging a grocery cart behind them. Almost before Captain Allen got the car stopped, Rachel had the door open and she was charging out. He tried to grab her. He missed. And she went running out into the blinding snow and wind and the below zero temperatures. You can only imagine 40-mile-an-hour wind and what the wind chills were. And she finally got to this stooped figure. And she reached out and touched the shoulder. Said, "Please come in. We'll take you to a warm place." And as she reached out and touched this stooped figure, all of a sudden, "Don't touch me!" Rachel was so shocked, so horrified, she stumbled back. "Ma'am, please come with us." "Leave me alone!" Rachel stumbled back to the patrol car. She fell into her seat, visibly shaken. Not just the impact of the bitter cold, but the impact of seeing this. She wasn't sure. Was this human? What had she just encountered? Shane said to her, "Come, let's go to Benny's diner. I'll buy you a cup of coffee and a piece of pie." She says, "Do you know who that was?" He says, "I do. I'll tell you all about it." So they drove a mile or so over to Benny's diner, and Benny he'd been in business for over 25 years. And when the weather was at its worst, he and a couple of his employees were always there, with the lights on, the doors unlocked, ready to take care of the police and any other emergency responders. Shane and Rachel found their way to a table. They shucked off their heavy coats. They were poured big cups of steaming coffee. They both ordered pie. Rachel was white, just white. She said, I've never seen anything like that. Who was that? Captain Allen said, that was Ida Mae Dunphy. Who is that? Let me tell you a little bit about Ida Mae. For as long as anybody can remember, Ida Mae has lived in a box on the North Alley, just the other side of Main Street. But she hasn't always lived in a box. Ida Mae, before that, lived in the Camden Hotel. Now, that was not any great shake. The Camden Hotel was owned by a slumlord. It's no longer even there. But she lived there for 20 years or more. It's now gone. Ida Mae's been on the street ever since. But let me tell you a little bit about Ida Mae. She didn't always live hand to mouth and on the street. Ida Mae was born and raised in Edenworth. Some would say Edenworth. Small town. Lovely town. One of those idyllic towns that people dream of. You know, that the beautiful Christmas images, people on Christmas Eve in the snow, going out shopping, and just everybody friendly and wonderful. Ida Mae's dad was Randolph Dunphy. Randolph Dunphy was the local banker. And he was married to a very, very plain, quiet, private woman, Eleanor. Randolph was, they had been married quite some time before Ida Mae was born. She was their only child. And Randolph was convinced that she was sent from heaven. And he treated her like a princess. Every evening when he came home, he would bring a little gift for Ida Mae. And he would fuss over her and just tell her how special she was. Randolph had one of the few motor cars in town. And every Sunday afternoon, he and Ida Mae would go for wonderful drives across the countryside. When Ida Mae was about 7 years old, they were driving on a particular highway, and she happened to look up on a hill. And on the top of that hill was the biggest house that Ida Mae had ever seen. And she turned to her dad. She said, "Daddy, what is that place up there?" He says, "Oh, that's Livingston Manor. You'll get to know Livingston Manor someday." "Daddy, why? Why would anybody need a house that big?" And he said, "Well, let me explain to you. That house is owned by Glasgow Livingston. Glasgow Livingston, known to his friends as Glassy, is one of the most extraordinary people you'll ever meet. Life has been very, very good to him. He has more money, more resources than he ever could possibly use or spend. And a few years ago, Mr. Livingston determined that anybody that was alive right then, and they're in Edenworth, and their descendants, when they reached the retirement age, could come and live at Livingston Manor at no cost to them. Now, there's a proviso. The proviso is that when Glasgow Livingston invites you to come for tea or coffee or whatever, that you go and you meet him and you spend time with him and you get to know him and he gets to know you. And then later, when you reach retirement age, you can go to Livingston Manor and live out your days there. You'll have a bedroom, 3 meals, medical care, and all of the kind of fellowship and friendship that you would want in a community of other people. Well, life went on. Ida May kind of tucked those things in the back of her mind. As she grew older, she was quite the student, a straight A student. She was a good athlete. She ran on the track team and she set some records. She also played several instruments. Ida May was quite accomplished, and when she graduated from high school, that summer particularly, between then and when most students would begin university, one of her friends invited her to go with her to Livingston Manor and to have tea with Glasgow Livingston. Well, Ida May was aware that invitations like that didn't come all the time, but she was busy. She was busy. She was busy primping for the boys, wondering what she was going to do with her life. And she turned down the invitation. Later that summer, while she was still home, a big limousine pulled up in front of her house. And a man in a very formal suit that walked very uprightly came to the door with an engraved invitation to come to a party at Livingston Manor. And the invitation was for Ida May. Ida May thanked the man profusely and then tossed the invitation on the table by the door and didn't give it another thought. She was busy. She was busy. She went off to university. And sometime during her freshman year, that same big limousine came onto campus, pulled up right in front of the dormitory where Ida May lived. And a different man this time got out of the car. Very, very friendly, winsome kind of guy. Got out of the car, went up and asked to see Ida May. She was paged in the dormitory. And she came down to the lobby, and the man said, "My name is Glasgow Livingston, and I would like to invite you to Livingston Manor for dinner. Would you join us this evening for dinner?" And Ida May said, "Well, I appreciate your invitation very much. I have a sorority meeting this evening, and I'll have to pass." Mr. Livingston said, "Thank you very much," and he exited. Well, as time went on, Ida May did quite well at university. And then she went to the big city after graduation, and she got a job as an administrator in a financial firm. Now, Ida May had a plan for life. So whenever the company would have plans that talked about pensions and savings plans and what have you to prepare for retirement, that seemed so far away to her she gave it little thought. After all, what did she need with long-term planning? She had Livingston Manor. Well, she went through her life. She always rented a very, very spacious apartment, had it dressed and decorated to the nines. She had a closet full of designer clothes, lots and lots of shoes. Ida May lived life to the fullest. She didn't save. She drove a fancy convertible. And men, because she was so pretty and accomplished, men pursued her all the time. But she was so wrapped up in herself that she had little time. Little time for men, for dating, or anything else. Well, time rolled on. Time rolled on. And as we all discover, the latter years of life arrive sooner than we ever expected. Finally, this was in the days when corporations had mandatory retirement ages. She reached that age and was terminated. Did she have a pension? No. Did she have savings? Not a lot. She didn't have the income to support her lifestyle. So she sold all the furnishings in her apartment. She sold many of her clothes and shoes. She terminated her lease. She packed everything she owned into that fancy convertible. And off she went back to Edenworth. And she drove down that same road with a big smile on her face and anticipation, that same road that she and her daddy had driven on so many years before. And then she saw it, Livingston Manor up on the hill. Bigger now than she had even imagined. Wings added on to the mansion. And then it occurred to her, she didn't know how to get there. She could see it, but she didn't know how to get there. She drove around, country roads, back roads, this road, that road, and then finally, she came to this huge stone gate with this wrought iron swinging, double swinging gate. And she pulled up, she pushed the beeper on the intercom. Then a very formal voice came on. "May I help you?" She says, "Yes, I'm Ida May Dunphy. I would like to come in. The man said, would you say your name again? She said, yes, I'm Ida Mae Dunphy. He came back a moment later and he said, Ms. Dunphy, we don't have an Ida Mae Dunphy on our list. Oh, you must surely have it. I grew up here in Edenworth. My daddy was Randolph Dunphy. He was the banker. My mother was Eleanor. She lived at Livingston Manor. Certainly you must know who I am. He said, well, give me a moment. She waited patiently, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. Finally, the voice comes back over the speaker. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not known here. You'll have to leave. Oh, I can't leave. Surely you must know who I am. I was on the Trek team and I was talked about how wonderful she was. And the man said, ma'am, we don't know you. Please turn your car around and leave. Well, she got huffed and started snapping at him. And finally he said, ma'am, I should not have to call the sheriff. Ida Mae drove away, just about as sad and dejected and hopeless as any person could possibly be. She drove to the nearest big town, and she found the Camden Hotel. And she rented a 2-room apartment, moved her meager belongings in, and lived out much of her life there. It was lonely. She didn't have a lot of resources. She paid her rent on time. She would go to her closet. She would look at her shoes, at some of her fine clothes. But she realized there was no place to wear those things. The men weren't as interested in her now, because she was older, had lost much of that beauty. As time rolled on, her landlord took less and less care of the Camden Hotel. He didn't fix anything. The heat was spotty. The plumbing didn't always work just right. Drains got stopped up on a regular basis. Doors didn't always work. Life became more and more difficult. And then the day arrived when Ida Mae couldn't pay her rent. They let her slide about 90 days. And then the sheriff showed up at her door to evict her. She had long ago sold her car and the last of her fancy bags and things. She had no place left to go. And she found a big box on the north alley of Main Street. She's lived there ever since. she's grown older and older, more and more bitter. And the more bitter she becomes, the more it impacts her personality and her appearance. Until she is what you saw today, Rachel. Something that looks almost inhuman. Rachel looked at him and said, well, what's to be done with her? Captain Allen said, you know, social services have tried to reach out to her. I've reached out to her many times over the last 25 years. To no avail. Nobody really knows how old she is. But she's very old. But she just keeps trudging along. In kind of a hopeless path of destitution. Now, my question, are you Ida May? Those that are listening on the radio, those that might listen in days to come on the internet, are you Ida May? Has God called your name? The living God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Master of the manor, has He called your name over and over? And have you responded? Have you responded to the proviso that you come to know Jesus? That you spend time with Jesus, that He knows you and you know Him? Or are you much like Ida May? The invitations have come. Your friends have invited you. But somehow you've just been too busy. Your job too busy. Your children require too much. The work that needs to be done around the house and on and on and on. The golf that needs to be played. The tennis. You know about the Lord of the Manor. You've heard about the manor, heaven. But is your name recorded in the Lamb's Book of Life? When you reach that gate, will your name be recognized? Now, I know that in many respects, I'm preaching to the choir. Most of you have a personal relationship with Jesus. That's great. Your names are in the Lamb's Book of Life. But maybe the most important person in this story was Ida May's friend who invited her to go to an event at Livingston Manor and meet Glasgow Livingston, the Lord of the Manor. You see, that person that issued an invitation, we almost missed her, didn't we? But maybe she did the most important thing that any human being could do. She gave an invitation to meet the Lord of the manor? Have you, with your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life, have you invited someone to meet Jesus? It's the most important mission in your life. So when you walk away today, remember item A, totally and completely consumed with self. The Bible calls that sin. Having a God before him. Who was Ida Mae's God? Ida Mae. She was just too important to be bothered. The day will come for everybody when there are no more chances. When you leave this life, if your name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, you will be turned away. Not because the Lord of the manor is mean, but because he gave you ample opportunity and you couldn't be bothered. So this week, answer two questions. Do you really know the Lord of the manor? Or do you have some business to do with God? Some repenting? And the second question, who are you going to invite to meet the Lord of the manor this week? Next week? The weeks to come? Pray with me, won't you? Lord, sometimes it's stories that speak loudly to us. Jesus, you were famous for stories. Stories that touched people's lives. Some rejected you. Some hissed and spit at the idea of a personal relationship with Yahweh. But Jesus, you are Yahweh. You are a relational God. And you are anxious to meet whomever we bring to you. O Lord, let the power of your Spirit fall upon us and give us a new motivation and new priorities in our lives, that we may live our lives to your glory and your honor, now and forever. Amen.